Animal Land by John Hauge. Chapter 5. Bernard's Reign. Bernard labored up Animal Land's largest hill to get to a bluff overlooking all of Animal Land. A cough that started halfway up as a nuisance had grown. He was breathing heavy from the climb. The inhale part was getting more difficult. However, the cough was helping with the exhale half of the sequence. In the past, we cubs would race each other to get to the top, he thought. Now it's just a personal challenge to finish the ascent. Unchanged, he said out loud, though no one was around to hear it. The view was spectacular. Green rolling hills were to his right, and the yellow grassy lands were to his left. The river passed through Animal Land, connecting the hilly areas with the grasslands before disappearing into the horizon. It was the same view that the founding animals saw when they came into the valley. The next generation of animals will not be able to come up here in their old age and say this, he mused to himself. Bernard was proud of his efforts so far as the leader of Animal Land. The hospital area had materialized from an idea in his head to the largest complex in Animal Land. It was so large that it could now be seen from the hill. Bernard could make out the new main structure that contained the treatment and recovery space. The original hospital area was converted to a food storage area. There was a small collection of a dozen dwellings for the staff on the north side and another collection of dwellings for the support staff in charge of supplies and logistics. Bernard concentrated some more on the vista in front of him, a combination of that which came through his eyes mixed with the vision of the future in his mind. The imagery in his mind prompted a thought. This view could be much more spectacular. He then took stock of his heart rate, which was still elevated despite reaching the end of his ascent. Bernard was at a point in his life where what was needed to be done was never clearer. This was countered by the fact that what he wanted to do was never harder. Everett and Dominic were handling the leg work for Bernard. But the next project was going to require an even larger effort. It would change the view from the bluff forever. Bernard allowed himself one last thought. So many plans, so much to do, yet so little time left to change this view. Omega. Given a telescope, Bernard may have seen his warrior friend, Alistar, down below on the hunt. Alistar was facing his own new reality after the war. Alistar's heart still tapped at a quickened pace from an earlier charge that ended without a kill. The heavy breathing had subsided, and with it a switch back to airflow through the nostrils instead of the mouth. This put him back into stealth mode. A gazelle with an odd-looking black spot on the left ear strayed from the herd and did not seem to be looking. Keep looking away, Alistar thought to himself. A calm breeze was blowing into his left ear. Not optimal for attack. To get wind into his face would give up his foliage cover. He continued despite the wind conditions. 100 yards. A few stealthy paces, and he closed to 40 yards. And then a mere 20 yards. Still no hint of detection by the target. Go! Alistar's brain signaled to his hind legs to transition to full speed. In seconds it was over for the gazelle, and in a few more seconds Margaret was over as well. That is, Margaret was at the kill scene surveying the spoils. She seemed to arrive almost before the gazelle's heart stopped. Great, thought Alistar. It took me 4 runs at the herd to get this meal, but I guess even this performance qualifies me as a more able animal. Alistar ripped the back legs and hind end off. Margaret grabbed the head half, which was larger and had the better internal organs, and started to pull away. She released long enough to thank Alistar. Thank you. The look from Alistar signaled some resistance was soon to come. Margaret did not wait for a reply from Alistar, but simply walked off with the kill. Alistar thought he was getting old, but having Margaret arrive so quickly confirmed it. Margaret had to be close before my attack, he figured. If she was man or some other carnivore, it might have been this gazelle watching Margaret take off with me as the kill. Oh well. His thoughts turned back to dinner. He looked down at what Margaret left him. At least a third of a gazelle was better than none. He ate his meal a bit more efficiently, not leaving a morsel to the circling vulture flying above him. As Alistar was finishing up, Jesse, leader of the tigers, appeared out of the tall grass. Alistar asked, heading out or in, partner? Back in. Alistar was a bit surprised. This early? Surely someone as able as you can go out some more. Jesse laughed off the assertion. Heck, any more for today goes directly to Margaret. To heck with it. I've given enough for today. Alice Starr understood Jesse's comment regarding Margaret. Jesse transformed into a more serious look and tone before his next comment. Funny thing, I actually hunted a heck of a lot less before the war to fill my stomach. This sure is not what I expected from our victory in war. Alice Starr kept up his politician's positive spin. It was a long-standing tradition to not criticize one's successor. Look at the ground. Jesse looked down. Grass, not straw. Well, yes. Alice Starr continued. Look up and see the sky. Jesse looked up as Alice Starr continued. All blue, divided by only clouds, not steel bars. Well, yes. Alice Starr finished. That is what victory looks like. Jesse was forced to agree. I suppose so. With that, Jesse took off back towards his den. Alice Starr was still a bit hungry. Making another run on gazelles was out of the question. There was another solution. He wasn't happy about it, but it was a practical solution. Alice Starr found some hyenas over the next hill. This time the plan would be to follow the hyenas. Not very dignified. The hunger grew as he followed them from one hill to the next. The hyenas found a herd of zebras. They isolated one of them and dropped it. Alice Starr moved in and chased off the hyenas to claim the zebra. Now if only I can get this eaten before Margaret arrives, he thought to himself. As he ate, he couldn't help but worry a bit. It was a sign. Poaching off the poachers was a signal that his time was running out. Pretty soon the hyenas would no longer be scared of an old, washed-up has-been lion. As Alice Starr continued to eat, he could taste the foul stench of hyena on his food. No regrets, he pondered to himself. Ronald will carry on. If Ronald would just find a mate, then I'd know my legacy would be assured, he thought. Then I'd know that I've got nothing else left to contribute to Animal Land. At one time, I'd kill hyenas just for fun when there was nothing else better to do. Now I've degenerated into eating their leftovers. Alice Starr softly muttered to himself, pathetic. Omega. After the inglorious meal, Alice Starr returned from the hunting grounds and went to see the school for young lion cubs. Being with the cubs made him feel younger. It was traditional that the old teach the young. With politics over and his strength waning, it was time to start a new direction. The war had taken the last of his good years from him. Probably out of habit, he stalked up on the group of young cubs. Through a gap in some brush, he saw the group arranged in a semicircle. None had detected his presence. A rather young camel was talking, but Alice Starr did not hear the words. He flashed back to the day that he spied on his son Ronald. Ronald was a quiet student who focused on the instructor's words. That is, as long as the meaningless ones were not trying to distract him. Ronald earned top marks in history, rhetoric, and reasoning. Alice Starr was very proud of his son, an excellent student and excellent warrior. Yet for some reason, he hasn't been as interested in the female lions as he was as a student. The din of the instructor's voice grew louder as the memory of Ronald, the student, faded. Alice Starr moved around the bush and faced the students. It's Alice Starr, our former leader, announced the instructor to the assembled cubs. Why, I must admit that, indeed, it is true. I am Alice Starr. Hi there, all you youngsters. Alice Starr turned back to the instructor. While I am flattered that you recognize me, I'm afraid I am at a disadvantage in reciprocating the same towards you, sir. Oh, I see. I'm Instructor Nicholas, the new Cub School instructor. Dominic appointed me to teach the Cubs. Very good. Pleased to meet you, Instructor Nicholas. I thought the young Cubs here would like some insightful lessons from one whom has seen quite a bit of action. What a great idea. He looked at the Cubs, not wanting to dismiss Alice Starr too abruptly in front of the Cubs. He changed into an apologetic look with a voice to match. But I'm sorry. You will need to go to the instructor school. Instructor school? Yes. Dominic wants all of the instructors to be certified to ensure that they are providing the best instruction. Certified. Alice Starr demonstrated his surprised voice to the class when he said that word. Instructor Nicholas went back to his happy face. He was very excited to talk about the certification process. Yes, certified. We want to make sure all instruction has consistent quality and all subjects are covered uniformly. Everett started a school for teachers during the war. Naturally, us camels and the horses were the only ones that could balance time between war duties and studying. We have enrolled other animals into the program and should have more teachers ready to graduate soon. Alice Starr stopped listening after he heard instructor Nicholas mention Everett's name. The activities of the camels were of no interest to him. You have demonstrated that you know my name. This is not in dispute. But don't you know who I am? Normal modesty gave way to a hint of indignation at the notion that his qualifications could be contested. Instructor Nicholas looked puzzled. You are the lion Alistar. Alistar raised his voice a bit. I am the leading ace of the lions of Animal Land, the first ace in both peace and war. Instructor Nicholas waited for more. He didn't seem to understand the significance of what I said, observed Alice Starr. When it was obvious that more detail was not coming, Instructor Nicholas replied, Yes, but we must ensure proper technique is taught, not just one lion's opinion. Alice Starr didn't seem to understand, observed Instructor Nicholas. Alice Starr ignored Instructor Nicholas and continued. My skills were deemed excellent. In fact, they were found to be so outstanding. I was appointed chief of the animal warriors before being elected leader of Animal Land. Given this affirmation of my qualifications, how can I not be qualified now? Instructor Nicholas was still not impressed and furthermore did not understand the relevance of this title in terms of teaching qualifications. He decided that it was Alice Starr that needed an education. Just because you possess certain skills does not mean that you have what it takes to teach. There have been many advances in teaching theory. We have to go beyond the telling of tall tales from the last war and excessive time wasted out in the trial areas. Then there is the bias of the instructor that needs to be considered. Typically, oral accounts of the actions of lions in the war overlook the important contributions of the camels and horses. We need to make sure these contributions are appropriately emphasized. Starr was even more confused. The camels never risked their lives. How much bravery was there in moving supplies from point A to point B? What hunting skills do the camels possess? Camels. See, this is the type of bias we need to overcome. The instructor continued. Cubs need a full breadth of knowledge. Not just how to fight, but also diplomacy training. Training on how to avoid fights, training on how to settle disputes peacefully, and training on how to avoid provoking fights. These are important concepts that can help us avoid a future war. This was the most idiotic thing he had ever heard, thought Alice Starr. He started to tire of this debate. He briefly entertained the thought that if Elliot had a hump, this is what he'd look like. In any case, I didn't come to argue with the instructor, he thought. Alice Starr turned to the cubs. Hey, partners. No reply. I said, howdy, partners. The second time provoked the cheer Alice Starr wanted. After the boring bickering, he wanted to wake the cubs up. How many of you all cub pokes want to hear about the camels? Silence. If volume was a judge of favorability, one would have concluded that the answer was no. How many of you cub pokes want to hear about the Battle of Creek's Crossing? Cheers broke Alice Starr's words. Alice Starr elevated his voice. Where I mauled 5 men in one day, becoming the first lion ace in the war? The answer was swift and clear. Unanimity was prevented by the instructor. Quiet down, cubs. Instructor Nicholas waited for the noise to drop off. Yes, we would all like to hear this, but I'm afraid you need to get your instructor certification before you can be qualified to tell this story. After a brief pause, let's thank Alice Starr for his visit and wish him well. Disappointment set in with the assembled cubs. Alice Starr walked off, more bewildered than disappointed. Certification? What the heck is that? Alice Starr thought to himself. He continued the thought. Let's see where Stewart is on the defensive works project. I'm sure he wouldn't give me a bunch of certification grief. Omega. After crossing a couple of hills, Alice Starr arrived at Stewart's work site. Stewart was surprised to see Alice Starr stop by. Excuse me, ladies. Stewart, How is my favorite five-toed pachyderm this fine day? Just taking a bit of a break. We are making good progress on getting the boulders up to the top of the hill. Man, we'll not walk along the side of this hill so easy come the next war. Stuart's words made a lot more sense than Instructor Nicholas's words. That is great. Alice Starr emphasized the word great with his roar voice. Stuart, my friend, is there room for a lion to join the festivities? Give me a break, Alice Starr. Animals. Your age would better serve Animal Land through teaching. Your days of doing are coming to an end. Now, should be teaching. Alice Starr appreciated the reality check after the rebuff by Instructor Nicholas at the Cub School. After relaying the teaching story, Alice Starr had to correct Stuart's doing/teaching logic. One is always a teacher first and a doer second. Your actions on this hill are teaching many animals, even animals you have not yet met. The work of freedom does not end with the conclusion of the last battle. In times of peace, the work of freedom changes from fighting to preparing. This lesson that you are giving today will far outlast the benefit to Animal Land of elevating those rocks. Stuart never thought that deeply. Whatever. All I know is that I need to stop talking and start doing. Alice Starr understood. What kind of certification do I need to help you with, Stuart? Stuart looks quizzically at Alice Starr and then smiles. He points his trunk at one of the boulders. What is that? Alice Starr replies, a rock. Stuart points his trunk towards the top of the hill. What is that? Alice Starr replies, a hill. Congrats. You are now certified to help. Both laugh along with Stuart's female audience. Stuart took Alice Starr to the staging area on the frontier side of the hill. There were a number of other elephants and other animals already working there. This is the staging area. If you want, you can help rig the ropes around the boulders so that they can transport. Stuart looked at the other animals. Most of the others had made their way back from the water hole and had begun work without waiting for him. He felt a bit embarrassed for being one of the last to join. Alice Starr was holding him up. One elephant was missing, though. Where is Willard? One of the elephants answered. Willard had a sore foot, so he went to see the doctor. He'll be out for a couple of days. Stuart nodded, understanding. Never mind him. We have got work to do and a short time to do it. Let's go, animals. Our offspring's future is defined by our actions today. This time Alice Starr nodded his understanding. Stuart and Alice Starr joined the others and resumed the work to fortify the hill. Omega. Bernard's medical bills had been mounting. He turned over his den and den area to offset his medical treatment. However, it was coming evident to him that to continue treatment would require another source of finance. Bernard petitioned the Committee for Animal Welfare to support further treatment. Ronald wanted to see the committee in action firsthand. The Bernard case would be the first time he would see the committee adjudicate a case. He knew that Everett and Dominic were members, but he didn't know the others. As he got just outside the hospital area, he saw the chimpanzee, Charles. Hi, Charles. Hi, Ronald. I was walking by your place the other day and was surprised. Looks like the weeds are winning. Ronald had surveyed the area 2 days ago. Weeds were sprouting up and needed to be pulled. Not everywhere, though. It looked like Charles had been working to control them, but all in all it looked like he was losing the battle. It looked like the weeds were ahead in the point count going into the 8th round of the fight. Charles had already concluded this. Supporting the hospital area called for more production from his farm, but he had to do that with less help. His youngest son, Eli, answered Bernard's call and went to work in the hospital area. This put a strain on Charles and his other son, Andy, who decided not to participate in the hospital area. Those two were left doing most of the work. But Charles could not let Animal Land down, so he worked both on his farm and in the hospital area. Charles figured that once the hospital area was set up, he could spend less time there, and perhaps Eli could also come back and spend some time on the family farm. Until then, Charles was extremely busy. It is what it is. I'm quite confident that the weeds are not losing, but victory is not assured yet. Once the hospital area is up and running, we can get back to normal. Well, Charles, what has Everett got you working on today? But victory is not assured yet. Once the hospital area is up and running, we can get back to normal. I'm here for the meeting of the Committee for Animal Welfare. I was drafted to be a member by Bernard and the camels. Really? Ronald was surprised, but only for a moment. He, too, had been drafted by the same trio. The high weed levels started to make more sense. Charles is here and not back home working his land. Charles confirmed, yep. Should be a quick vote. I'm here for the meeting as well, albeit just as an observer. Very good. Come. The meeting will be over at that corner. Charles led Ronald to the meeting area. Margaret and her assistant were there, along with Everett and Dominic. This was the committee, Ronald concluded. 2 camels, 2 horses, and 1 chimpanzee. Margaret and her assistant worked to supply food to the hospital area. Charles worked part-time in the hospital area. Everett and Dominic were the 2 animals charged with building the hospital area. This seemed like a conflict of interest, thought Ronald. Having the animals serving on the committee and working in the hospital area was one problem in Ronald's mind, but not the largest. The biggest problem was that none of the animals on the committee were warrior animals. No lions, no tigers, no elephants. The chimpanzee, Charles, did have some involvement in the fighting, but it was small compared to the 3 warrior animal groups. Ronald thought about the petition by Bernard. Bernard had explained the purpose of the hospital area. This was not the original purpose of the hospital area. Somehow getting old was now defined as an illness. Ronald broke up the mutual admiration banter that followed the announcement of the beginning of the meeting. Well, partners, it's probably the prairie dust coming in through my ear, clouding my mind, but I thought the mission of this committee was to aid the animals actively working on the defenses of animal land. Is that not so? Silence. The other 4 on the committee looked mortified. Dominic was first to speak. We need Bernard's wisdom to continue the change we need. Everett added, I think it is important to point out that just because Bernard is not doing the physical labor does not mean that he is not still working to make animal land safe from man's intervention. He is. And this committee is working to keep animal land safe as well. Although Ronald was asking about Bernard, the switch to include the committee indicated that Everett was defending not only Bernard, but the non-warrior animals as well. Ronald kept this observation to himself. It made sense. It was hard to not use the new hospital area to help Bernard, who was a genuine hero. But in doing so, the precedent of giving aid to animals not physically working on defense would be established. The final vote was 4 animals to 1. Margaret and her assistant voted with the camels, Everett and Dominic, to approve Bernard's treatment. Charles was the only exception. Not much of a surprise there, thought Ronald. All those in favor were appointed by Bernard. Charles was also appointed, but probably acted in his own self-interest, as this expansion of services would postpone his ability to get back and work on his land. Before the war, the idea of treating older animals would never have taken place. These things were sorted out by the family or the individual animal. Ronald decided that he had seen enough and headed home. Home, where the sun still rises in the east, food has 4 legs, and weakness was not a strength. Omega. On the road home, Ronald was joined by 2 cubs. Hey, Mr. Ronald. Hold up. Ronald looked. One may have been Edward's son. Mr. Ronald, I'm Luke, Edward's son, and this is Mickey, Alexander's son. Ah, yes. Edward and Alexander were good fighters. How are they? Luke continued doing the talking. Oh, fine. They're enjoying the fruits of peace. Mickey joined in with the comment, mainly trying to avoid Margaret. Ronald chuckled. Understand. I reckon no one can enjoy the fruits of peace without any fruits of labor. Luke changed the subject. We saw your dad at school today, but he was chased out before telling us about the Ace in a Day story. Well, follow me, my young cub friends. I'll tell you the story on my way home. Great. Great. Good roars. Both of you. Omega. The 3 didn't get far before they came across Charles's land. It was still as he remembered a couple of days ago. Ronald looked at the two cubs. They didn't seem to notice. Then an idea came into his head. Hold up a moment. The two cubs stopped and turned to face Ronald. This here is Charles's land. The cubs followed Ronald's paw, which pointed towards Charles's land. They looked for a moment and then returned to looking at him. They didn't say anything. Tell you what, cubs, why don't we lend a hand pulling some of these weeds? And as we pull weeds, I'll finish the story. Sure. Animal Land will appreciate it, partners. Sometimes being a lion ain't all glamour. Work hard and I'll promise you I'll show you the better side of being a lion cub. Omega. It took quite a few more paw prints in the ground before Ronald reached home. He still lived with his father, Alistar, as he really hadn't had time to leave the nest. Ronald had watched more and more animals stop working on repairing the defenses in order to spend more time waiting to see the doctor animals. And now, with Bernard, even animals not working on the defenses were using the hospital area services. Ronald had wanted to strike up a debate with his father for some time, but he wasn't sure how appropriate it would be since former leaders don't typically comment on their successors. As for Alistar, with Animal Land not requiring his know-how, he was simply lying down watching the tree shadows increase in height. Alistar broke his eye contact to watch Ronald approach. Hi, Dad. Hi, son. I've got a question for you. Go ahead. The whole karma of Animal Land just doesn't seem right. Shouldn't we be working on our defenses first? Alistar had been pondering the priority change for some time, yet Ronald was the first to seek out his opinion. As taught in school, when the founding animals escaped man's circus, they escaped the bars of confinement, the capricious whip of punishment, and forced labor. They journeyed to this valley with nothing but a dream of a life with freedom. Look at our security work. We corralled ourselves up, built the defensive positions, then we scattered and went back to our individual lives. Now we continually contribute to the hospital area, rather than each animal fending for themselves. Remember the 4 laws given to us by the founding animals? Ronald nodded. Alistar continued anyway. First, all animals must defend Animal Land. Second, man's nature is to enslave and eat animals. Third, survival of the fittest animals ensures survival of Animal Land. Fourth, let there never be limits to each animal's prosperity through work. Ronald was unimpressed with such basics, but he did note that his father seemed to be impressed with himself. What do you think, son? Pretty good for someone who wasn't taught by a certified instructor. No response from Ronald. Ronald must not have heard about the new certification business, thought Alistar. So, Dad, where in these laws does it say that one animal has to donate their labor and food to other animals? They conspicuously do not speak of, nor do they imply any such animal action. This was something I reckon that Bernard had taken upon himself to conjure up. Only the first law requires one animal to help another. This is because defense is the foundation of liberty. If the liberty and freedom we enjoy in Animal Land is a tree, its roots are our defense. Without these roots, the tree would surely fall. The hospital area could be the fruit of the tree. Sure, son. Bernard wants the fruit. He's tipping the watering can, he's chasing the birds away, he's keeping the worms off the branches, and he's rigging up the nets to catch it. He's doing everything possible to harvest the fruit. Before Bernard, only those animals willing to put up their own effort would climb up and reach the fruit. Sure, son. Now we, the more able animals, have to get the fruit so that Bernard and his minions can give it out to their supporters. You see, son, he is only seeing the top. Long before there was fruit, there were roots growing underground. Defense. Right, son. You don't see defense when it is there. You only see defense when it is not there. I get it. When it is not there, the tree topples over. And with it all of the fruit disappears. Bernard and the rest of his followers believe that the roots will always be there, that the roots will not be harmed by his overwatering, that the roots don't have to be protected from predators. I don't know if an allegory is going to work with Bernard or the camels. Alistar didn't stop to debate, but continued his lesson. The hospital area runs counter to the 3rd law. Survival of the fittest animals ensures survival of Animal Land. By supporting weaker animals, the stronger animals are weakened, and as a result, the defense of animal land is weakened. In our tree, we are adding extra water to maximize fruit. However, if the ground is too wet, then the root system fails. With a failed root system, the next strong wind to strike animal land will cause the tree to topple over. In fact, with the extra water, the tree may be the greenest of green and richest in fruit right before the toppling. Bernard is smart, Dad. Why doesn't he know this? Bernard is. Well, you will discover what Bernard is. It is not proper for a former leader to comment. Ronald was a little disappointed. The situation seemed too grave to do that. Let Ronald figure it out. Method of problem solving. Look, son, being an animal is being the best. It is a difficult life, but a fair life. The best rise to the challenge, and the weak are eaten. This principle is embodied in the third and fourth laws. The strongest, fastest, and most cunning animals get the best food and living areas, while the weak animals get worse food and living areas. All animals benefit as the most able animals are available to defend animal land. You get what you reward. If speed, strength, and cunningness are rewarded, you get more. If they are not, these animals leave to find greener pastures, leaving only the weak animals to defend animal land. That made sense to Ronald. Dad, how come you won't come out with me and talk to the animals and convince them that Bernard is leading us on the wrong path? Son, my days of leading are over. If I were to continue to lead, I would be hurting more than I would be helping. It is up to the younger generation to set the direction. This also made sense to Ronald. However, wasn't it Bernard that was setting direction? Speaking of the younger generation, what are you doing about giving me a grand cub? Ronald's drifting mind was suddenly at attention once again. It was the first time Alistar had ever asked such a question. It caught Ronald a little off guard. There is this one lioness I'm kind of smitten with. That's mighty good. What's her name? Mari. Oh, yes, Mari. Mighty fine lioness. And she seems to be fancying another. Over you? Nonsense. Who is it? Elliot. Alistar started laughing. He stopped just long enough for one last statement for the night. Son, that should not be a problem.